The folks at Naughty Dog stirred things up earlier this year, stating that the ending of Uncharted 4 might be controversial and some fans might hate it. This, of course, led many to suspect that Nathan Drake would be dying at the end. What we wound up with was a surprisingly enjoyable and satisfying ending. In fact, they actually played it a bit too safe. In the end, Nate saves his brother and his marriage and then becomes super wealthy anyway. The comments from Naughty Dog, in retrospect, seem little more than misdirection for the fans. All things considered, I really enjoyed the ending. It felt like what Nate and company deserved. Some might be annoyed with a happily ever after ending, but to be fair, Uncharted was always known for basically being a video game Hollywood blockbuster, and since most Hollywood films end in such a pleasant fashion, why wouldn't this game? This is Uncharted after all, not The Last of Us. Fun, upbeat tones are an important part of the franchise's success. But there's one issue with the ending that strikes me as a bit odd given writer and director Neil Druckmann's penchant for incredibly tight script writing, and it all has to do with Sam. Nathan's long-lost older brother Sam is obsessed with the mythical treasure of the famed pirate Henry Avery. He's been obsessed with it ever since childhood, and he's the one who ropes Nate back into this adventurous lifestyle just to find it. Yes, Nate was also interested in the goings-on of Avery, but he hadn't spent almost every waking moment of the past decade and a half focused on it. That is, until Sam came back into his life. The last time he saw his brother, they were working with a man named Rafe in an effort to track down that treasure. Fast forward 15 years, and both Sam and Rafe are still looking for it, though separately at this point, while Nate is doing his own thing. At the end of the game, Rafe's top henchperson Nadine betrays him, leaving him and the Drakes on the burning, exploding pirate ship. She basically spells out one of the major themes of the game: that obsession will lead to your demise. No, we're not talking about drive or focus or ambition, it's specifically talking about obsession and framing it as unhealthy and dangerous. Nadine then notes that it's no surprise that everyone who has become obsessed with Avery's treasure winds up dead.
For them, what's the point?
Everyone obsessed with his treasure gets what they deserve.
Right in the treasure room lies the impaled skeletons of Henry Avery and his second-in-command Thomas II. It's clear from the swords in their chests that they battled over the treasure, with both men being struck down in the process. Similarly, we saw the corpses of nearly a dozen other famous pirates who had also been killed as a result of their obsession over accumulating wealth. More still, Nate encounters the remains of several men who were clearly seeking the fabled booty, but fell short and died on their quest. And of course, Rafe gets his just desserts in the final fight too. Obviously, he's the villain. Quite literally, every person who we know was specifically obsessed with finding and obtaining that treasure winds up dead, except Sam. Now, Nate and Nadine both survive, but they're different. They might have started the journey interested in the gold, but both of them have cast off that obsession by the time they actually get to Avery's ship. When Rafe orders Nadine to take her men to the ship, she refuses. She suspects it's heavily booby traps, like the catacombs they just trekked through to get there. Many of her men were killed in the process, and she says that the treasure isn't worth the danger. She's all set to give up and head home, alive, recognizing that the treasure won't fix her organization's reputation, and instead has created more problems for her. She only ends up on the ship by threat of force from Rafe. Nate, similarly, had come to realize the treasure wasn't worth it when his wife shows up to help him on the island. Upon realizing the strain this adventure's put on his marriage, and learning that Sam lied about the reasons he needs to find the treasure, Nate becomes disinterested in the gold entirely. When they do eventually rescue Sam from the mercenaries, it's Nate who has to convince Sam to give it up. Only Sam doesn't listen and he winds up running off on his own to find the treasure by himself. Where Nadine ends up on Avery's ship against her will by literal force, Nate finds himself there against his will from moral obligation. He's chasing his brother, trying to save his life. Neither Nate nor Nadine is there by their own volition, nor do they have any interest in the valuables around them at that point. Both Nate and Nadine therefore earn their survival. Yes, they were part of the treasure hunt at the start, but both reject it by the end. It's not important to them like it is for Sam and Rafe. Rafe refuses to perish the thought of obtaining the treasure, so, naturally, he perishes instead. Sam is in the exact same boat. Sam doesn't give up either. He's on the boat, but he's there of his own accord. No one forced him to enter Avery's destructive ship. When Nate gets there, he finds his brother trapped under a beam. If it weren't for Nate, Sam would have died there, as he was probably supposed to. Sure, Sam eventually learns to let go of the treasure and move on. When they get back to civilization, he tells his little brother about feeling unfulfilled though. Essentially, he never truly gave up the obsession, and he never ultimately learned a meaningful lesson about understanding what's truly valuable. By all accounts, Sam did nothing to earn his life at the end. Everyone else had to do that before getting to the treasure. Anyone who didn't, died. It feels a little inconsistent then that Sam should be the lone person to survive without having to actually grow as a person first. Yeah, it's safe to assume that he figured it out eventually in post-game life, but it leaves a thematic hole in the conclusion of the game. It might be easy to say that Sam should have died, as death seems to be something fans weirdly crave as if it's the only sort of meaningful consequence that can occur. However, it's hard to think given what the game presents, that he was supposed to live. They tried to have it both ways, with Sam functioning as the MacGuffin to bring Nate to the ship, since Nate had matured and learned to give up the obsession, so he would otherwise have no reason to confront Rafe with the treasure. At the same time, they clearly couldn't figure out a solid way to have the Elder Drake learn anything significant beforehand, thus earning the right to life again. But this is not to say that he should have died in a general sense. I like the idea of Uncle Sam partnering up with Sully for a while and helping Nate and Elena raise their daughter, yet they didn't exactly find a well thought out or compelling reason for Sam's survival. Instead, they had to violate their own thematic setup to force it. Of course, Uncharted 4 is still the best written game of the series, and Druckmann continues to impress with his character writing. I'd be a bit surprised if that ending was controversial at all. I just found it to be a bit thematically empty, which actually might be an overall representation of the franchise. Lots of fun, very satisfying, but ultimately kind of hollow and void of any deeper meaning. Alright, so another thing that could be argued is that Rafe, Sam, and Nate all represent this idea that you don't overcome obsession by yourself. If you think about it, Nate overcomes his obsession because he has a loving, caring group of emotionally supportive friends in Elena and Sully around him, whereas Rafe hires enablers. He is only around people who will help him obtain the thing that he's obsessed with. So he allows that obsession to drive his environment, which further fuels his obsession. So his obsession just gets worse and worse and worse, whereas Nate has a more healthy, grounded support group around him. Sam has been in prison for 15 years, so he doesn't have anything. He's basically a baby. He's like a blank slate here. And so you can make the argument then that when Sam is stuck on the ship and Nate goes to help him, fights and kills Rafe, you can make the argument that in this situation, Nate represents the loving, caring support group that you want if you're trying to overcome obsession, and Rafe represents literal obsession, self-destructive obsession, and that when Nate kills Rafe, you basically saved Sam. I think that is certainly a valid way to interpret it. I find that to be a little oversimplified, but, this is Uncharted, so maybe. Which actually, I just want to mention that at the end of the video, I mentioned that I think of Uncharted as a franchise as being something that's really fun and pretty to look at, but ultimately feels a little bit hollow. They do say that they're trying to make a video game version of the Hollywood blockbuster. I just am somebody who feels like a truly good Hollywood blockbuster is one that is fun, entertaining, but also doesn't bank on you not thinking at all. I think good blockbuster films find that balance between making you think and also just entertaining you. So thank you for watching my video. If you have, cool. I never would have thought anybody would watch a video that I made, because who cares? It's the internet. There are way too many people doing truly amazing things on YouTube. And I am not one of them. So certainly I appreciate that. So let me know what you think. Do you think Sam should have survived? Do you think he should have died? Are you one of those weirdos who happens to think that Nate should have died? Totally fine. I just think thematically insignificant. Let me know in the comments if you think that I'm stretching way too far. And what do you think of Uncharted 4? Which I thought was great.